price, whether it's like inflation or what have you. So just seeing everyone trying to like adjust and try to plan and come together with scraps at the end, but something that's still functional is pretty cool. But happy to be here.
We're glad that you're here. All right, Shreya, if you would like to share a little bit too about your background and maybe an activity that you enjoyed working on.
Yeah, sure. So, hi everyone, I'm Shreya. So, I did my undergrad back in India and I moved to US in the fall 2019 and I started off with my master's in electrical engineering. So, I'll be graduating this semester by the end of the semester. And how I remember getting into STEM is so my dad is a civil engineer, and I used to see him work with making different architectures, and that got me interested. Besides that, I was always a kid who would question everything, like how does this work, every gadget. Or if my guy friends used to play a game, I was like, well, how are your video games functioning? So every graphics thing, or every even a simple gadget, or about the fan, fridges, everything. So that's how I got into it, and then reading stuff on it and trying to make or build up small things like robots and stuff. So that's how I ended up in electrical engineering. And besides that, one of the activities in STEM that I feel is a good experience that has been or that has taught me many things has been I was volunteering for autistic students and researching with them. So we had this research based on AI, and we provided them with VR sets. So, as autistic students face difficulty in giving exams and they have concentration problems, so using VR, it was very easy for them, and they felt like playing a game. So, that was a good research, and that taught me many things and how STEM could be for everyone, and it can be such a changing experience in life, in learning, and everything could be made like so simple, just like playing games or day-to-day life. You can make anything just very simply. So, and the activity that I like in here, which is used, is one of my student instructors. She made this oil water separation. So that led to the students questioning that how they can clean up the oceans or the oil spills. And so that was more focused on environment as well as on the stems. So activities like that in which they think of it as a bigger picture, not just restricting them to their houses. So yeah.
Great. Thank you both so much. So these are our special K-12 STEM Center guests today, and they're going to actually be facilitating breakout rooms and leading the scavenger hunt we're doing later today. So you'll get to ask follow-up questions then and spend a little bit more time with them then as well. So now I would love for, you've heard about us and what we're doing here. So if anyone wants to, of course, you're welcome to also turn on your camera. You're absolutely invited to do that. You don't have to, but we would like to hear from you in the chat. So we would love to hear your name and what is your first STEM memory. So for example, my first STEM memory was playing in the sandbox and figuring out how to dig tunnels so you could dig down and dig back up again and that they wouldn't collapse. That was something that was I think was my very first time where I was really immersed in STEM. So if everyone could type their name, all of our VIP volunteers type their name and their first STEM memory in the chat. It can just be a couple phrases or a couple words or a phrase. And then all of our other guests are welcome to also share theirs as well. So I'll wait just a minute for that. And if you can't think of your very first one, just like a STEM activity that you enjoyed that was either in school or out of school. So it could have been something in class like exploring plate tectonics or exploring let's see, magnetism. I know we did some cool experiments with magnets. All right, now they're coming in. Ooh, taking apart a mechanical pencil. That's really neat, Yvonne. Playing with Legos, absolutely. Couple Legos. Building a bridge out of toothpicks in elementary school. That's cool. All right. Well, thanks. Feel free to keep adding those. I'm going to move on and just explain what we're going to be doing today. So we're going to look at some examples of online STEM activities. We're going to look at a roadmap of what makes an activity engaging or high quality. We're going to look at some tips for modifying activities to online learning. And then the main event is going to be our STEM scavenger hunt. That's going to be led by our facilitators, and that's going to be all of you in breakout rooms. And then we'll come back. You're going to share your results of what you found, and then that's going to be it. So my first activity example, this is an activity called Take It in Stride. It is from a wonderful resource called SciGirls. And I already have the link up here. So what I want to do is show you kind of the context of it, show you the activity, and then I want to hear from you. We're going to actually be using a Jamboard for this. If you're already familiar with Jamboard, if you've already used it, that's great. If not, then now you have a new online tool to use. So this activity comes with videos and video clips that are kind of based around it. So I just wanted to kind of show you the context of this activity, this Take It in Stride activity. And then when you actually open up the activity itself, and it loads. Let's see, do I have to refresh? Here we go. So now we can see it's kind of got this activity description here about, what's the idea behind it, the kind of what we need for this, what we need to know, including the time and the materials, and then our instructions here for the activity. And you can see this is only a page long. So what I'm going to do is in the chat, I'm going to share the link for the Jamboard. I'd like you all to navigate to it. So here we go. That's the Jamboard link. And it looks like this. So I'm curious, could everybody write yes or no in the chat if you've used this before or something similar to this before? I guess you can just say if you have used it before. All right, almost exactly 50% so far. That's interesting. So if you haven't used it before, this is a great tool to kind of brainstorm together as a team, different ideas, and get feedback. So this right here, I think you can see my laser. I'm pointing over there to the left, and that's where the sticky note icon is. So it's the fourth one down. So how you add your own sticky note to the board is you click on that sticky note, and you can see a sticky note pops up here, and you would just type in what your response would be. So my question is, what I would like you to respond to on the Jamboard is, what do you notice about this activity? So what do you like about it? What would actually, as a learner, would you want to do this? And what don't you like about it? What questions do you have? So I'll leave it up here for a second for you to kind of read, and then for you to put one sticky note up on the Jamboard of what do you notice about this activity? All right, so I see a couple, so you can't tell when people are typing, you can only see after the note has been posted. So I see a couple of people saying that they like that this is physical, and I totally agree. Like when we're doing this online learning, it's great to have an opportunity for the students to stand up and do something. And it's great, for us, if we're the learners, I think we'd really appreciate that as well. So that the information is presented very well, absolutely. Some questions about if our students are going to have the space to do this, if they're going to have the space to do these strides, right, without maybe knocking something over or interfering with something else that's going on in their house. Absolutely, that's something that you'd probably want to address with students. Looks easy to follow. Hands-on, simple. Yeah, so a good point. One of our sticky notes here is about accessibility. So what if somebody has like a mobility accessibility, inaccessibility where they're not able to maybe step? So how could you accommodate for that? What's some different ways that you could measure stride? Or what are some other different individual differences that you could, with movement that you could measure? So that's a really good point. It'd be something that you definitely want to think about adapting. All right, so now I'm going to open up another example, and this is called Parachute Design. And this is from NASA, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory that created this activity. So already you can see there's some significant differences at the top here. We have just a ton of information. So we've got, we have our grade level here that's really clear. We've got, these are all the topics that it overlaps with. We have, these are the next generation science standards. These are the Common Core standards. So all kinds of information that's really useful for teachers who are trying to figure out how to grade this activity, what goals are being taught by this. And then the time amount, which is 1 to 2 hours. We've got this kind of overview like the other activity had. We have a long list of materials here. We also have these kinds of notes for teachers, which I find useful. So there's suggestions about how you might manage a classroom. There's some safety suggestions, which is great. And there's these tips for remote instruction. So rather than this whole activity being for at home, they've got some tips on how to modify it. We also got some background information and a video that you could share with your students. And then down here, we've got the instructions for the activity. So you can see it's quite more extensive than the other one, and that we've got 29, I think, steps here. And then we've got our discussion. So this is what you might talk about with your students afterwards. Assessment and a rubric for doing an assessment. So this is quite a different kind of lesson plan. So what I'd like you to do is on the Jamboard, go to the next. So at the very top of the screen, so I think I can share that again here. The very top of the screen, if you click on the next one, you can see we've got a whole new Jamboard up here. So I'd love for you to answer the question, how do you think that this compares? And also just, do you like it? What don't you like about it? What do you notice? What are your first impressions about this activity? And so I'm gonna display the activity again so that you can see it. I'll put it here on kind of the beginning procedures. Yeah, and so someone asked, is it K2 or K12? And it is K2, I believe. Yes, so these are for our younger learners. All right, yeah, there's more steps involved here. So more steps might mean more time. It might mean more directions for students to follow, rather being kind of open-ended and exploratory. On the other hand, all the steps are really helpful because it shows you exactly what to do. So that's definitely an added benefit of these really carefully thought out lesson plans, absolutely. And yeah, so it does mean that it requires an educator to walk them through it. and requires some modification. Great. So feel free to keep, if you haven't submitted your sticky note, feel free to finish it up. But I am going to go back to our presentation. So, in thinking about these two activities, I'm going to apply it to some sort of general ideas about how I look for engaging and high quality lessons. So this is our, this is a roadmap that I created. This is a tool that you're welcome to use. And so the first thing that I always want to emphasize is that the most important thing is to know your audience, right? There's a lot of really great activities out there. Some are really great in and of themselves, but they're not going to be a great fit, and they're not going to be engaging for students who that doesn't quite match up with. So we have to know who it is that we're teaching to, who is it that we're presenting this information to. So that's going to be what grade level the students are at. What is their prior knowledge and experiences that have to do with this topic? So for example, if we're doing the parachute activity with second grade students, maybe they've already done a measurement activity earlier in their math class. Maybe they've just started to think about measurement. And that adds a whole nother variable to your experiment of how long the strings are for your parachute, or how wide across your parachute is. So knowing that, and as many connections as you can make with what they already know and what they're already learning, is fantastic. And then if they are at home, what digital access do they have? So all of this is really good to know. You might not be able to get all this information, right? Because they're not your students, you're stepping into the classroom. But the more information, the better. So next, when you're looking for these high quality activities, these engaging activities, look for hands-on science. So hands-on doesn't necessarily mean you're making something with your hands, but it means that it's student driven, that the student is driving their own exploration, problem solving, discovery, and long-term projects is a really good example of this kind of hands-on science, because they're looking at multiple different areas and bringing it into this. So quick question, you can type in the chat, were both of these activities hands-on science? Quick yes or no. All right, it looks like people are agreeing that yes, it is. And even though, right, in the Take It in Stride, I believe it was called, activity, that they're not actually making anything, right? They're measuring something, but that's really hands-on because it's active. And they're driving their own learning in that, and their own exploration. So good, good picking up on that. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is that the activity is relevant. So what this means is that the activity connects to their own lived experiences. So science phenomenon is, when we're studying science phenomena, there's a lot of those that students are already experiencing their everyday life. And it's so cool when you actually teach one of these phenomena and their eyes kind of light up, because it's something that they've already seen and experienced their whole life. And now they can name it, and now they can figure out what that is. And it's so exciting for them. And so building off of that kind of foundation, that shared foundation, and building off of that and onto something new is really exciting and engaging for students. So sometimes you're going to have a topic that there's just, it's difficult to find that relevancy. And so you might have to dig a little bit deeper. So I'll use an example of, so in the space camp that I put together with a Mars rover, right? How could you make a Mars rover relevant? And so one of the things that I thought about is like the surface of Mars, right? So the surface of Mars is going to be a rocky surface. So thinking about what experiences do students have of traveling over different surfaces, if that's, maybe riding on a bike, if that's walking or running on sand versus cement. So, and, if we have toy cars, if we're in person, then we can actually do that and have that shared experience in front of us. So that's kind of how I would make that more relevant. And thinking about the parachute activity that we were looking at earlier too. So making that more relevant by saying, with our young students, right, what happens when you let go from the monkey bars and you fall and hit the ground? You know, that might hurt a little bit, but imagine the much greater distance of the rover is dropping, and that we want to make sure there's a parachute so that it doesn't get hurt either. So something like that, that just makes it relevant and relatable. And then last, being intentional. So this is really basically just saying that once you know who your audience is, being thoughtful about trying to pick an activity that's going to be a good fit for that audience. So you want to have a lesson where the goals are rigorous, which means like a little bit challenging for them, right? Just the right level of challenging, and grade level appropriate. You want to be mindful of how much time it's going to take, how you don't want to finish it in 2 minutes, right? And also if this lesson fits in with what other, with the greater context of what they're learning. So you can't always know and do all of these things. It's not necessary to check all of these off if you're, you know, doing this as a checklist, but it's just kind of a good roadmap to identifying high quality STEM lessons that are out there in the wild on the internet. So going back now, first I want to see if there's any questions. So feel free to unmute or type into the chat before we move on to our next topic, which is online learning and STEM tools. Oh, online learning and tools. All right, doesn't look like there's any questions, but feel free to type them in if something comes up. I will definitely pause. All right, so when we're thinking about adapting things for online learning, one of the most important things is going to be materials. And I think that this probably makes a lot of sense, right? We can't provide the materials in a classroom. We can't work on them all together. We can't pass out technology right now, right? We can't, you know, pass robotics pieces through the internet. So we have to be really thoughtful about what material students have. So part of that is being flexible. So trying to find an activity where the materials that you can use are not just one thing, but there can be a variety of things that all kind of fill the same purpose. So like different variations of a popsicle stick, right? A popsicle stick, maybe people don't have that, but maybe they have a plastic spoon, and thinking of, or chopsticks or something else that they might have that could kind of serve that same purpose or that same function, a piece of cardboard, something like that. Uses elements that can be found at home. So this is also emphasizing that. And so thinking about not making assumptions of what students have, but trying to be flexible and thinking of many things that they might have access to. And also trying to kind of steer away from food, because we want to be really mindful about families that might have some food insecurity, where, you know, using food for this purpose of a science experiment would be taking away food that they would be eating. So we want to be sensitive about that. And then is a time effective activity. So we know that students are experiencing Zoom fatigue, right? Because we're experiencing Zoom fatigue. So we want to make sure that it stays within that time frame, and that we're using that time really effectively, that it's engaging and fun and informational. And then last, one of the most important things about online learning is that we have to keep it engaging. So we have to keep that flow of information back and forth. So for students to be able to interact with all of everyone as a group, and then also maybe with one another, because that's really where students learn, is in addition to actually doing science, it's the talking with each other and learning from each other. So here are some of my tips for modifying things for online based off of those kind of discoveries. So first is, of course, thinking about the materials, being flexible about the materials. Science is social, so besides learning by actually doing the activity, right? How else are they getting information? How else are they interacting with one another? Having a contingency plan. This is really big, because something that's going to surprise you. And so having a plan for when that happens. So your activity might be done in 10 minutes. Or you might have way more material than you thought you had. And so you've got to figure out what to take out. Or maybe with digital access, maybe you had a Jamboard planned and a few people weren't able to log on and do that. So how can you get that extra feedback? Visuals. So another great way to make things feel more grounded and provide examples so that students aren't kind of left afloat to figure out things on their own, build confidence in their work, is having videos, pictures, and then maybe a PowerPoint for like texts to remind them what it is that they're doing. And then accessibility. So definitely thinking about ways that students can engage differently with the activity. So this, not just digital access, but accessibility, for example, with that Take It in Stride activity, with mobility access, how much you modify that, how much you have a different way to go about that activity. Okay, so I just wanted to do a quick example of a material modification. So this is an activity that comes from the Exploratorium, which I love. They've got fantastic activities. And this one is fairly straightforward because it's got a plastic bottle, it's got a packet of ketchup. And so what they're doing here is they're using the packet of ketchup, which is something that just barely floats, and squeezing the bottle and having it travel up and down and exploring that phenomenon. So what are some other possibilities if students don't have these exact materials? What are other things that they could do? So in a quick internet search, thinking about what are other ways to do the same exact experiment, in addition to using a ketchup packet or like a soy sauce packet, you could also use a pen cap. So a pen cap also fulfills that same function of just being barely floating enough. So it's things like that and different modifications where you can suggest to students, okay, if you don't have this, that's absolutely fine. Can we find this around the house instead? And the last thing that I want to talk about is more online tools that you can use. So you're going to have all of these resources. This is like a checklist you can use, or if you want to revisit this through the recording, you're welcome to do that too. So don't feel the need to write everything down. But the first online tool that I think is really fantastic is this Next Generation Science Standards. So when you have a question about what is rigorous, what is grade level appropriate for the students, definitely look at the Next Generation Science Standards, because that's what experts are saying students at that grade level should be working on. So it might not exactly tell you whether your activity is a good match, but it'll give you a good idea of kind of the realm of work that students are working at that grade. Also, using short videos, so like video clips that are under 3 minutes, are a really wonderful way to showcase a science phenomenon that you can't necessarily bring to them at their home, right? You're not quite sure if they've also had that shared experience, so you want to have that shared experience together. So I use the example here of a plant growing, right? And what it looks like when a plant grows all sped up. So being able to see that and talk about plant growth is just a really wonderful way to use media. So videos you can also use, in addition to YouTube, of course, is National Geographic Education has some great videos that are under 3 minutes, and PBS Learning Media also has great video clips. And then at the last thing here is ideas for how to make your activity feel local and relevant to the students. So for example, if you're learning about math and you're learning about shapes, or you're learning about materials, tying it into a structure like the Watts Tower, which is this really great improvisational feeling of geometry and materials, and really studying that piece of artwork is a great way to think about bringing geometry and materials and bringing it local. Another example is looking at National History Museum, YouTube channel. They have a lot of great stuff that, like in the La Brea tar pits that they're digging up right now, that you can look at and relate back to what it is that you're doing. And then another suggestion, ways to make things relatable, is to bring in kind of like a face to it. So a role model who's working on that same concept topic. So code.org does a really good job of, and that's for computer science, of recording videos of role models talking about coding and how they use coding. And then SciGirls also has a lot of really great mentor videos. So I totally recommend these online resources to use in the future. All right, and now I'm going to stop and turn it over to our special guests who are going to lead our scavenger hunt. So the idea with our scavenger hunt, I'm just going to quickly let you know what the flow is going to be. So you're going to, we're going to divide you into breakout rooms that are going to be led by either Danielle or Shreya. And you are going to find an online STEM resource that fits a very specific situation. So you're going to use the online STEM resources page, which is something that the K-12 STEM Center put together, to try to find an activity that fits the situation that you choose. And then together as a group, you'll pick that activity that you think is the best fit activity, and you'll modify it to make sure that it works for online learning. So anything else, Danielle or Shreya, that I missed before we go into groups?
No, I think that was all, I guess. You covered most everything. Yeah.
All right, fantastic. So I'm going to work on creating those breakout rooms. And if anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to put that in the chat while I'm working on this. All right, so you should have gotten a notification. If not, please let me know, and we'll be back in 15 minutes to close out. All right, so for group one, how did that go? You're welcome to unmute and share. We're not gonna have time to go through all of our the different findings of our scavenger hunt, but just in general, were you able to find something?
Yeah, we first went through the elementary school scenario, and Jessica said that she did a project with water like recently, like yesterday. So we just kind of used that example.
Perfect.
And then we also did the middle school example and did a coding one.
Excellent. And I think I saw Scratch was on there.
Yeah.
I love Scratch. Scratch is fantastic. Great resource. And there's also Scratch Junior for like really young kids. So they've already modified within themselves. They're fantastic. Room two, we're not going to have time to share out all of what we did, but if somebody from room two can share kind of how it went, were you able to find something?
Yeah, so in our room, we focused more on the first activity. That's like the one that we did. And that one was where we tried to find something that was within 30 to 45 minutes for middle schoolers. And we also chose something with programming. I think it was Pooja who came up with the idea of like a coding, or it's on code.org. And there it provides a lot of different program modules for middle schoolers to help them go through it. And we talked about like some possible like issues like with students who may not have like this laptop or like a coding platform to work on. So we like came up with ideas like the instructor could share their screen and actually do the activity through that way. And we could use stuff like the chat or even like what we learned today with Jamboard to have the kids be more engaged. They could type in different answers or like what they thought of as solutions, like when they're going through the activity with the instructor. And like, even if like someone who didn't have coding knowledge, like they could also participate because they could just kind of like follow through and see how to code in a more like simple basis. So that's like kind of what we came up with. And we also said that maybe it'd be a good idea to have or to know the level of programming from each student first before we engage. So that way we kind of like know how to start and have everyone fully engaged, because some students may not be on the same page in terms of their coding knowledge and stuff like that too.
Yeah, code.org is such a great platform. They also, something that's great is students can actually work ahead sometimes if they are a little bit more advanced on code.org. Not every coding platform is like that, but yeah, that's a really good one. Awesome. Thank you both so much for sharing what you guys talked about in your groups. I know that it is now 6:01, so I did really want to have Danielle and Shreya share a little bit about their kind of last words of advice moving forward, because they're really immersed in this. But I do want to appreciate your time. So if you do need to go, I know Jessica left and said thank you for the day. So that was really fantastic. If anyone else needs to leave, you're welcome to. We're recording this. But Danielle and Shreya, if you have any last words, any bits of advice, please feel free to share out. So maybe because we started with Danielle last time, let's start with Shreya.
Yeah, I like the ideas about making sure first that if they have even the basic like a laptop and an internet access, that's super important for a virtual. Then I like the ideas of like maybe instructors can be more engaging and they can really take the feedbacks, and also knowing like if a student can't share the screen, just they can share their own screen. And we can provide them with the materials like K-12 program does, and that really helps them out. So things like that can be really helpful. And just keeping the lesson plans like super to not focus to only one group, like how we had it, it can be to all the genders and all the races. So whenever like even if you are showing a group of students, make sure to, include a diverse group, like always focus on diversity. Anything that the student does not feel that, oh, I'm not included, especially like in science. So it's always shown like a male scientist. So maybe includes a female scientist as well. So, or vice versa in any situation, just to let the students know that they feel they are included in every part. And appreciating their ideas, like even if they're small ideas, like small ideas lead to big ideas. So always appreciating that.
That's a great quote. I love that. I'm going to take that quote. And thank you, Shreya and Danielle. Your kind of last words to send us off.
Sure. Just quickly, I would say from a planning and facilitating standpoint, if you don't know, you're not sure, go with your gut, go with your passion. If it seems like it's really hard to come up with an activity for some reason, um, go with what you know. I was in a similar situation and I ended up talking to third graders just about materials and how you would characterize them, whether they're colorful, dry, reflective, and the students seemed really interested and engaged in being able to identify those traits in the actual activity. It was like, okay, we're going to build a spacesuit because I'm interested in space. So find random examples around your house that that follow the three like requirements that I gave them. So it was really close to home to me, and because of that, I was able to be confident and move throughout the presentation in time. So that's all I have. Just go with what you know.
That's great advice. Thank you. Thank you both, our special guests. Thank you so much to VIP for helping arrange this and put this on. And then, of course, to our volunteers who made it today. Thank you so much for being engaged and interacting. And I hope that you're able to take the most out of this workshop as possible. And I'm going to end by turning it over to Danelle, because I know she's got a survey link to share.
Yep, 1 second, but okay. I will be dropping a survey real quick. Shouldn't take more than 5 minutes for you all to fill out real quick on the workshop today. So if you all could do this right away, that would be great. Or just take a little bit of time to think about your responses before submitting it. But if you can get it in by tomorrow, that would be ideal. Yeah, so thank you all for being here. We appreciate you coming out to our VIP events. And as Sarah said, being really engaged and participating. It really means a lot to our program.